The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, here are a few ways that you can do it. Download the Living Zen podcast app for iPod, iPhone, or Android. You can also purchase additional Zen Talks by Venerable Eshu on iTunes or Amazon.com. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by joining our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at www.zenwest.ca and click on the membership tab. Thank you for your support. So there's no reading today. Last week we finished the 48th case, the final case in the Muman Kan. And I was just reflecting that over the past several years I've given talks on the Platform Sutra and the record of Linji or Rinzai and the Muman Kan. It's been a number of years in the making doing all these talks. I wanted to just take a bit of a break because I just want to make sure that you all don't make the mistake of thinking that Zen practice is about gaining some insight into these texts, understanding something about these texts, or applying yourself to penetrating these old stories or these old talks. It's really upside down. It's the other way around. That these talks, these old texts, these ancient ways of pointing are ways of offering us some guidance on how to approach the moment-to-moment living of our lives. The form that we use in Zen practice, the form that we use in the Victoria Zen Centre is challenging. It's demanding. And it's easy to sit and kind of go through the motions. And I have to honestly say that I felt like the chanting just before I started to talk was kind of going through the motions. There's a great opportunity that's presented in this structure, in this form, in this container that we practice in. And we're offered this opportunity to apply ourselves to the moment-to-moment unfolding of the activity of our lives, or we have the option to live as we do so often, just like, as Wu Men says, like ghosts, clinging to bushes and weeds. So when it comes time to chant, are we able to drop whatever it is that's going on in our heads at that moment, whatever it is, the physical sensations that we're having, whether we're tired, are we able to drop those bushes and weeds that we're hiding out in from our life, from the life that's unfolding right here and now? Are we able to drop this and manifest wholeheartedly in the activity of our lives as it's unfolding before us? As we develop as a center, as a community of practice, and as each of us apply ourselves to engaging our lives this way, engaging practice this way, it becomes more and more inviting for us to do this. So now we have this great big gong, and it makes this kind of thundering sound. And so imagine my surprise when this gong is giving us an example. The gong, this stupid, we think, inanimate, we think, non-sentient thing is sounding with every molecule, every bit of it. And this sound is so complete that if we just take a moment, we can actually feel it throughout our bodies. So it sets an example. And then it comes time for us to chant. And, tired. And, just a lot of stuff came up this morning. Maybe what's for breakfast isn't agreeing with me so much. And what comes out of us, this miraculously intelligent, entirely sentient bodhisattva, is sort of this vacant vocalization, which is a very small percentage of our being, which is a very small demonstration of manifestation. Zen practice, the form that we use here, it's easy to observe. Many people observe when they come to practice with us that there's a lot of form, or I can't say that there's a lot of form, but that the form has a very strong presence. And there's a reason for this, and many people balk at it. And there's a reason that it's present and that people balk at it. And it's very, very intentional. Just reflecting on this and how to go about practicing, whether it is engaging with the form that we use, or engaging in koan practice that we do, or in engaging with each other as officers training together, we find that over and over again we are brought up against comfort, I guess is one way of looking at it. Or another way of expressing it is self-concern. And not in a philosophical kind of way, not in a sort of heady, contemplating the differences between myself and other, but in a really visceral, kind of personal, emotional way. So when you come down to do interview and you're challenged or you're asked the question, how do you manifest unconditional love as a flower? How do you manifest unconditional love as a tree? We're placed in this situation which we spend our whole lives avoiding. We're placed in this conflict between the expansive capacity of our true nature and the limited shell of self-concern. There's not many places where we find this in our day-to-day lives so clearly sort of distilled into a moment. I was thinking about a few maybe that we can come across, and it's like when we're young and there's a person that we're really interested in, attracted to. And there's this whole kind of logical stream about going and talking to that person. And it's not such a difficult thing, and we say to ourselves, all I need to do is go and ask that person if they want to have coffee with me. It's not a big deal. And as we're distant from it, it's really easy to know exactly what we're going to do. We can sit there and we can plan out the script, and we can imagine the scenes that flow out of this moment. And yet, when it comes time for us to step forward and to look that person in the face, the experience, all I can say is for most of us, the experience is very different. In fact, for many of us, this experience will never happen, because at the moment that we step forward, not the thought of self, not the intellectual conceptualization of I am, but the gut-wrenching, entirely in your bones concern about death that if I do this, if I step out on that skinny branch out there, I could die. And that's, I think, literally what the body reacts to. And it's not even necessary for it to be a physical death, but it is a personal death. I may be embarrassed. I may be thought of as a loser or some kind of failure. What if things... So we're just beset upon by self-concerns. And this practice or this conflict is the crucial conflict that we need to confront in practice. Not just in practice, not just in this sort of contrived school of investigation, but in our very lives. This is the primary conflict between manifesting appropriately with a situation as we see it and being completely paralyzed and brought to suffer by self-concern, not in the thinking way, but in the paralyzing fear of the loss of who it is that we think we are. So, maybe another time that we come across this in our lives is when we, maybe we're growing up into our later teenage years and we're feeling like adults and we're living in our parents' house and we start to bump up against those rules that we feel, gosh, I'm old enough now and I can make my own rules and these are just silly. And so we turn to confront the parent. And there's another situation where, again, we think and think and think. We have the whole scene planned out in our head. And yet, when we turn and step into the room to face our mother or our father, look them in the eye, the entire weight of our lives is upon us, and to manifest becomes something very difficult, bound up in not the intellectual self-concern, but that actual concern for self. This isn't a philosophical concern, but a bestial, primal desire to protect self. We come across this experience so clearly very few times. And in many ways, because of this significance of this, because when we talk in Buddhism about liberation from suffering, about letting go of self, it's not the intellectual concept of self that we're talking about letting go of. We can do that in a few minutes. I can undermine intellectually the idea of something which is fixed and separate and permanent and lasting in just a few minutes with evidence that each of us sees every single day. It's not hard. And I think for most people that are practicing in a Buddhist tradition, that's why they're practicing there, because this just makes sense. But what we find is that just knowing this, just being able to understand this, just being able to even explain this to other people, doesn't have the impact in our moment-to-moment lives, in our interactions with the people that we meet, with the places that we are, with the situations that we find ourselves in. It's not transformative. This information isn't transformative. Where we change, where we transform, is when we, through practice, begin to place ourselves in these situations which are naturally conflict-inducing. So when we come into this form, it starts very small. It starts with a simple thing in the Zen Center like, okay, you've got to wear this certain outfit. For some people, right away, there's this survival angst or anxiety that arises. I don't like having to wear the same thing as everyone else. And when we look at it, when we look at the emotional response, we find right away there is I. What we're concerned about is not wanting to fit in or not wanting to lose myself. When we talk to people, when we experience the activity of chanting, it's the same. We have this resistance, and it's not an intellectual resistance, because when we listen to chanting, we can say, oh, that's really lovely. Or when we sort of read the sutras, we can kind of go, oh, this stuff is kind of, I quite like it. It really makes sense to me. When we talk about the idea of chanting, oh, yeah, that's reasonable. But when it comes to actually sitting there and making sound with our bodies, there's a resistance. There is a fear that arises because the experience is one of dissolution, of dissolving into something larger than the limited, fixed I am self. And over again, this form that we use is aimed at pressing us, squeezing us into this place where we've got to make a decision, where we've got to be clear on whether we're choosing the manifestation of the limited fixed self, or we are choosing to manifest the complete self in harmony with the situation. And not only to squeeze us into a position where we must choose, but to make it clear to us that the experience of one or the other is a choice. That when we go through our lives, the suffering that the Buddha talks about, the difficulty, the anguish, the dukkha that we experience in our lives is not something which is just dumped on us by some external thing, but arises from this repetitive, continuous choice to manifest the limited, fixed I am self in all situations. When we do walking meditation, this is another place where all kinds of resistances come up, because we're walking in step. It's a harmonious activity which invites us. And if we're able to open up our perspective, not just the feet in front of us, but to the whole world that we're walking through, there is for me, there's an overwhelming joy or beauty in just letting myself dissolve into the crunching footprints manifesting as walking Zen. When we engage in this form, when we engage as shoji, when we engage as jikijitsu, when we engage as densu or ino or any of these roles, there's two ways that we can manifest it. We can manifest it as little individual objects, individual things that are doing this activity all together, bouncing around off of one another, thinking about what my next job is to do, thinking about the mistakes that I could make or how it's going to look when I do it right. And the other way is to completely dissolve into the activity that we're engaged in. This doesn't mean not having your eyes open, not understanding what's coming, what the next thing is. But like a dancer or like a musician or like an actor, completely assuming the role wholeheartedly. You become the shoji. There's no more of the person who came in the door who's going to do the role of shoji today. There's only shoji, only jikijutsu. When we interact together as officers, when the Ino calls a meeting, here's another place where we are put into the terrifying situation of confrontation, where so many motivations, so many self-concerns and histories. You have a group of 5 people and you have 5 perspectives on how the practice session went and 5 histories of relating to people. It's a totally explosive potentiality that's there. And our challenge in that is to communicate clearly, straightforwardly, to dissolve together into one harmonious body of practice. Now I say that as if it's an easy thing, but perhaps it could be easier if we understand that when we come to practice together, we are a group, a collection of people, each of us engaged in combat, each of us on the razor's edge between life and death, each of us striving to manifest wholeheartedly as one with all things in this vast cosmos, to manifest the complete fullness of our lives, struggling to let go of self-concern, struggling to relax, to be soft and easy in the face of the constricting fear that arises every time that we confront the completion of our situation, the fullness of our lives. So when we practice together, when we talk about Sangha, it's very important that we also give rise to this, first, a deep respect for one another, a deep respect for coming to engage in this practice, which requires tremendous courage. And my hope is that just as my hope with this new instrument is that when we see an example of somebody trusting, when we see an example of somebody taking that courageous step forward to manifest wholeheartedly in this very moment, that it is an inspiration to us. And that instead of blushing and holding back ourselves, that we also join in the dance of living our lives in this very moment, fully, wholeheartedly, unabashedly. As many of us here have practiced together for several years. We've all gone through learning how to sit. We've all gone through our first Sundays and our first one-day intensives and our first 5-day intensives. We've all seen each other over years growing and develop. We've come to know each other through our actions, through our words. Part of the reason that we have developed the Zen Center in the way that we have is to develop a community of trust. The foundation of our practice, the foundation of being able to do this, is to be able to engage in that letting go in an environment in which we can feel safe to do so. The world at large is not always safe. It doesn't always encourage us to let go of this fixed, limited self. In fact, in many ways, it encourages us to hang on to it. The more we feel that we're limited, the more we feel that we're fixed, the more we feel that we're separate, the more we're scared, the easier it is to move you, the easier it is to sell you, the easier it is to fool you. And around we go in this cycle of samsara, dukkha, suffering. Our practice here is liberation, awakening. The physical, experiential realization of the capacity of the human heart, becoming Buddha, awakened, not worshipping it, not following it, not learning it, but manifesting it with every thought, with every gesture. So, as we go forward into 2012, I encourage you to reinvest, reapply take up the courage, take up the determination, the commitment to your life, to live your life. This dynamic, unfolding activity that lays before you, that arises before you, happens only once. How much of your life has slipped away while you hid out worrying about me, worrying about I wouldn't want. This moment is unfolding but once. So please don't waste it. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.